Talk Show. Recorded live.
Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness in celebration of the release of Drew's Halloween Man vs. Invisible Man from Monsterverse Comics. We're looking at the Invisible Men and Monster Heroes. That's our current retrospective. And this week, we complete the retrospective with Freddy vs. Jason from Ronnie Yu. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking from the perspective of horror fans who have. So warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson. With me from Austin is Drew Edwards, writer of the long-running comic Halloween Man from Monsterverse Comics. Say hello, Drew. Oh, I love that sound. Also in Austin, Tony Salvaggio, writer of the Victorian mech comic Clockworks from Humanoids, and Psycom, the manga from Right Stuff and Tokyo Pop. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. And in Los Angeles, special guest Adam Foshko, creative producer and screenwriter of the Skylanders series from Activision. Say hello, Adam.
Hi, how are you tonight?
Fantastic, and welcome back. Welcome
Thanks.
back. Yeah, you were around for one of my favorite retrospectives, which was the Dark Shadows series, which we did almost exactly a year ago, and it was a blast. So, all right, Freddy vs. Jason is a 2003 American slasher film directed by Ronnie Yu. The film is a crossover between the Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street franchises. It is the 11th and 8th entries in those series, respectively, pitting Freddy Krueger against Jason Voorhees. It's also the last movie in both of those franchises before they were rebooted. Okay, so in this movie, Freddy, which is Robert Englund, has grown incapable of haunting people's dreams as the citizens of Springwood, Ohio have pretty much forgotten about Freddy Krueger. And so, because the teenagers have been kept ignorant of his existence, and they set all that up for us, in order to regain his power, Freddy manipulates Jason Voorhees into resurrecting himself and traveling to Springwood to cause panic and fear, leading to rumors that Freddy is returned. However, Jason causes enough fear that Freddy comes back, but then Freddy can't turn Jason off, essentially, and so that leads to an enormous violent conflict between them. So that is the basic plot of Freddy versus Jason. I cannot wait to discuss this one. It's actually playing again on the screen in my office as I talk. Okay, so let's get our first impressions. I know, Drew, that this one is definitely one that you wanted to talk about. So let's do first impressions, and who were you rooting for? Let's try to keep these to under a minute. We'll go. I mean it every time I say that, I swear. Okay, first impressions, we'll go Drew, Tony, Adam, and then I'll go. Drew, lay it on us.
Well, when this movie came out, I have to say, my generation, who were kids in the 80s, were teenagers in the 90s, they really, really, really grew up on these characters, and in my humble opinion, sort of take ownership of them the same way the monster kids in the 60s took to the Universal monsters. There's just a lot of love for Freddy and Jason with people in my age group. Now, because of this, this is the last time I really remember this just ridiculous amount of anticipation for a single movie. I mean, when this came out, I literally had a group of 12 friends. We all went in a group of 12 en masse to see this movie, and it was one of the most fun times I've ever had at a movie theater. We heckled, we screamed, we all rooted for our monster of choice very loudly. We threw popcorn at each other. It was great. This was just a fun, rowdy time at the movies. But all that aside, I actually think that this is actually a really fun movie. I know that's a kind of a controversial opinion amongst, some horror fans, but, it's pretty good. It's very entertaining. It's extremely stylish. It's very gory. And frankly, actually, if we're going to exclude, let's exclude Wes Craven's New Nightmare. It's better than all of the other Freddy Krueger entries prior to that. It's Dream Warriors, New Nightmare, and this. I mean, most of the other sequels are crap.
You're ranking Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, and if we're going to rank this with the other, like I actually loved Jason X, but this is better than Jason X. It's better than Jason Goes to Hell. It's better than Takes Manhattan. It's better than a lot of those Jason movies leading up to this. And Kane Hodder as Jason is the best thing that we get out of those movies, and Kane Hodder is solely missed in this film. But I still think this is a pretty damn good Jason movie. And yes, I was rooting for Jason because he is the best monster to come out of the 80s. Thank you.
Excellent. All right, Tony, because I have lots of responses to all of that, but I'll save it. Tony, I want to know, where were you encountered this movie, and who were you rooting for, or did that connect for you?
Well, I have more of a nostalgia for the movie just because you and I got to see it we went late at night. We didn't get to do the whole camp experience, but the Alamo Draft House had a summer camp, and then at night they showed this movie. Arlie Ermy was in attendance. They had Q&A. It was
that was a hell of an event. That was a wild event.
It was really great. And seeing that, outside, with people was really awesome. I myself think this movie is a real mess. Like, there's parts I love about this movie. There's some great, and we'll get into that later. There's some great sequences, but man, oh man, I have zero actual love where I'm like, man, I need to watch this again. There's none of that. And there never has been, and I don't think there ever will be, other than I was like, oh, man, I could watch the parts that I like, maybe on YouTube or stream it or whatever, but I'm never going to just, grab this disc and go, I missed that in my life. It is not that movie for me. And I love Ronnie, I like Ronnie Yu movies, and I love Freddy. And, Friday the 13th, not as much as Drew, but I certainly, grew up with those movies and we would watch them with friends and stuff. But yeah, I don't have the same love that Drew has. That's for sure.
I am mildly obsessed with Jason. Not Jason Henderson, but Jason Voorhees. It has to be. And I'm so happy that we're doing an honest-to-God Jason movie. I have to say, that, if nothing else, I love this retrospective because we finally got to do a Jason movie.
It's funny to me that we haven't done the Friday the 13th pictures yet.
I would do 3 in a heartbeat. That would be awesome. I love that movie.
Friday the 13th Part 3 would be awesome. I'd love to do 3, and pretty nice if you could see it in 3D somehow. But I'd love to do 3. I'd love to do the original. I'd love to do 10. Jason X.
I don't think I've ever seen that one. But then
Jason X is actually a lot of don't believe a lot of the negativity. Jason X
my friend Max loves it, and he's really opinionated, and he was telling me I need to see it. So.
And I like Jason Goes to Hell. Actually, I'm kind of a fan.
I don't care for Jason Goes to Hell. I will never.
That way I can also never see again. But okay.
I own Jason Goes to Hell because I'm a completist, but I almost never watch it.
The problem with we'll get back to the problem with Jason Goes to Hell soon enough. Adam, first impressions, and yes, just to reiterate what Tony said, we saw this movie.
Well, who did Tony root
in the
for?
woods?
Who did Tony root for? Who did you root for, Tony?
Who did I root for?
Who did you root for?
I don't know. I mean, I like them both. Probably Freddy, but I'm not sure this is my favorite Freddy either.
Well, no, I'm not saying Freddy versus Jason. Who do you root for? This is important.
I would say Freddy, just because I was always more Freddy.
Okay.
And I saw, in the theater, I was able to see Freddy in the theater before I was able to see Jason. To be honest with you, so maybe that probably has something to do with it as well.
All right. Adam, first impressions. I love how I keep saying, try to keep this under a minute. None of us do that, and that's just the way it is. In other words, at this point, it's just tradition to say that. Okay.
Yeah, none of us are wallflowers, obviously. So.
Yeah, Freddy versus Jason. Go ahead.
All right. Let me preface this by saying that, of course, I have a deep love for the originals. I mean, I even like, certainly Halloween is another one I have a strong feeling for. And each of these antagonists, for lack of a better word right now, they represent completely different parts of the mythology, completely different characters that, came from the sort of the slasher movie vengeful spirit in terms of Freddy Krueger, or Jason Voorhees as someone who comes back. And certainly after the first one, where it was actually his mother who did the killing, and then he came back later, and then we continued on with the Jason mythology, who really stood as a signpost for, look, if you do bad things, kids, like have sex or trespass or drink, I will kill you. These are the things that really put the foundation for these films. And I have to tell you, I think there's a reason why the franchise was rebooted after this. Seeing it the way that you guys saw it at the Alamo, out in the woods, it's the best possible way of seeing this kind of picture, I think, because it is. If you've not had that experience, which is basically seeing it with your friends, it's basically a gladiatorial combat. It is basically an event. It's a spectacle, far more than it is a picture. I'll tell you right now, I hated this movie. I fundamentally hated this movie. And by the way, if I were rooting for somebody, it would be Jason Voorhees. But having said that, I didn't have the full effect of being able to go and hang out with my friends and throw popcorn and yell at the screen and do all the things you want to do in this kind of event. When you're sitting alone and you're looking at it on the screen and you're trying to take it in and you're barraged by horrible dialogue. The teenagers are miserable. It's just, you're looking at this thing and you're going, what the hell happened? And then
the mistake you're making is you're calling them teenagers. These are not teenagers. These are cannon fodder.
Right.
Yeah, entirely. But
but even cannon fodder can have good dialogue and not stupid crap.
It's really no better than us sitting down if we were 7 years old and I've got a Freddy doll and someone's got a Jason doll, and we're like, dude, who would win? And we come up with any kind of scenario we can in the 20 minutes we've got, and they duke it out. I'll tell you, Destroy All Monsters made more sense than this. It clearly comes out of that whole milieu of awesome thing versus awesome thing. And that's great. Except when you look at the history, which I did, of kind of where this story and script came from, and the number of hands it went through to kind of reach its final state. And there are different drafts of the script, some of which are far better than actually what hit the screen. You really, including David Goyer, who was, wrote one of the drafts.
Sure.
It's kind of amazing that this is reaching us in the state that it's in. But then I've
read a lot of the drafts, the previous versions of this, and I do actually think that this is. We can get more into this. I do actually think this is probably the most workable version they could do without ruffling too many. There's no way you could make a version of this movie that was going to make everybody happy. That was impossible.
Okay. But as an example, I know it's supposed to be 30 seconds or a minute or whatever, but we're already kind of going. There's a Peter Grigg.
Don't worry about that at all.
Who wrote AVP. Look, there's an interesting part of this, and that is they used protagonists that came from really both franchises. Alice and Jacob from Nightmare 4 and 5, Steven and Jessica and Stephanie from Jason Goes to Hell. And they used, roots in both of these as opposed to kind of what we have now, which is kind of not the same thing. At least. Are you
saying this doesn't have any callbacks to older movies? Because that's not true.
I'm saying that it felt a lot more like it was, I don't know, not true to form, but I mean it was nothing for me to hang on to here. I'm sorry. I'm gonna
let our Jason Henderson have his say, but we'll get more into this. I respectfully disagree, sir.
I'm not saying there are no callbacks. I am saying though that they weren't really satisfying for me.
And fair enough.
Yeah. Okay, so I actually, there are things about this movie that I actually did really enjoy. I'm glad that we have different opinions on this, because I actually did really enjoy this movie. But I have to say, what I thought was very interesting was how on the nose everything was. In other words, it was the storytelling is absolutely the most rudimentary level storytelling ever. I mean, you know, I've seen a lot of horror movies where I'm not quite sure what's going on, where the filmmaker has some idea about how the characters' powers work, and they don't quite tell us. In this one, every step of the way is sort of narrated by the characters. So I thought that was interesting. The fact that, like, Freddy spends a lot of time in this movie, since the basic idea of the movie is that Freddy brings Jason back to life so that he can gain new power. Freddy spends a lot of time looking at the camera and telling us where he is in his plan, just so that no 10-year-old watching the movie will ever get lost. Drew loves it. I'm more like Tony. What I have is just a fond association with it because I watched it in the woods, and I did like it. I liked it as a monster mash, and I also thought that there were a lot of shots. I'm a big fan of Ronnie Yu. I liked his Bride with White Hair. That's one of my favorite movies. There's a lot of, like, really good-looking stuff in here. So for me, the movie works. It also, by the way, now it's funny, Drew, you mentioned, and let's go straight into the style of this picture. Drew, you mentioned that you thought the movie was really gory. I actually was surprised because I thought that it wasn't nearly as gory as I expected it to be. This
is a matter of record that this movie is actually gory. This dethroned Dead Alive for the most stage blood ever used in a movie.
I can believe that, but I mean, look, nobody's head.
So it's not just me. It's not just me, but the violence is different in this because I would say, I mean, although Dead Alive is a very cartoony movie, this is like the violence in this has a different feel to it because it is very action oriented and it's almost like seeing a couple of superheroes lay into each other.
Think about something like the Toxic Avenger, where he's killing people with weight room equipment and stuff like that. There is nowhere near that level of.
Are you meaning to tell me Jason basically sodomizing somebody with his machete and then snapping them in half with the bed is not gory?
The snapping that is ridiculous. They put that gore right up there in the first 20 minutes of the movie. After that,
okay, well let's see. Freddy gets impaled with his own arm. Impaled with his own arm.
Story.
Spoilers, by the way.
Okay, it's spoilers. I don't want to get into a sort of a reducing absurdity argument where I'm just looking for more and more gore. Because really, to be honest with you, that's not my scene. I'm just saying that I've seen gore. This is not, to me, a lot of gore, and I'm not even a gore hound. Like a major gore hound would there might be a lot of geysery blood in here, but it's, I didn't think it was that bad. Tony, I mean, where do you come down on this?
Yeah, I don't. Maybe. Well, again, it kind of goes back to while it's on record that there's more fake blood, it is not as shocking. I think that's the difference. There's a difference between gore and shock. Like Toxic Avenger, when you first saw that, I mean that was something. Like there wasn't a lot of that. I mean there was, but we didn't. Most of us who first saw Toxic Avenger, we hadn't seen some of the cannibal movies and stuff like that, like stuff from the 70s.
Sure.
That we probably would have been like, oh man, that was worse, right?
Well, even RoboCop had a certain amount.
And so, but I think because by the time that we get to this movie, if you're like, we're talking about with Drew, you got a dozen people to go, like all of the horror buffs, we've seen all of this.
Yeah.
Like it's not shocking to me. Like at this point, and say what you will about me now. But most of the people, I would say everybody on this panel, on this phone call,
I would agree. I would agree that it's not shocking.
Is not at all. Nothing in this movie is something where you're like, whoa, I did not expect them to go there.
No, it's totally expected.
There's absolutely zero of that. And so I think that's what Jason's reacting to. Is like it's not that it's not gory. Then you could have 10 times the amount of blood, but nothing in it. Like like I said, I watched the movie and I'm like, ooh, that's kind of neat. Ooh, wow, that was, there was a lot there. But
to me is partly a style. Again, that's a stylistic thing. This is Freddy and Jason, who are, while at times frightening, they are kind of more in the quote unquote fun wing of Freddy less so than Jason, but they're part of the fun wing of horror, and there is gore in their movies. But like, one of the things I always liked about the Friday the 13th films is it's like, we're going to show you a magic trick, and this magic trick somehow involves dismembering somebody. And also again with the issue of style, and I would agree, I don't find anything in here shocking, but again, you're going into a movie called Freddy versus Jason. You're going to expect a certain amount of arterial spray.
Well, don't you think though that Freddy Krueger is in general more inventive in terms of the way that he kills people as opposed to Jason?
Freddy has a different. Yeah, I was actually talking about this with my wife before I got on here. Freddy has a different sensibility because Freddy is a sadist, whereas a lot of people, a lot of people when talking about the Jason character, they say he has the personality of the shark from Jaws, and I actually disagree with that. Jason is a child in a hulking body having a temper tantrum, and that is Jason's. Although some of his stuff is very interesting, visually, it's first of all, it takes place in the physical world, so there's going to be a different vibe, whereas, Freddy is, again, more sadistic, and there's also this sort of sexual element going on, which is absent really largely with the Jason character. But
I don't know about that. I mean, it seems to me the most interesting kills in the Friday the 13th stuff, and by the way, right after after we go over this, I want to talk a little bit about slashers in general, because this is something that I want to needle in on a little. But with Friday the 13th, to my mind, if I think of that first one of the amazing ones is, first thing he does is he slashes that guy in the wheelchair across the face with a machete, right? But
that's not Friday the 13th Part 1.
Is that is one, or is that 2?
That is not in 1. I believe that is in 2. I hope I'm not wrong about that.
And the guy goes down the stairs. But there's an amazing sort of meanness that has to do with just destroying innocence in terms of just young people, especially as regards their sexuality. So he's doing a lot of things like
Jason dislikes sex, but I don't think I don't think he wants to be a participant in it. Whereas,
no, I don't think so either.
Freddy is very different in that respect, because Freddy is a pervy old man.
Yeah, Freddy's pervy. Jason, though, has a tendency in his universe, I guess. The universe conspires to have a lot of horny teenagers that Jason winds up killing, and he's doing things like impaling them through the bed or slicing them in half or doing all kinds of...
if you're saying that there's not there's absolutely a phallic thing going on. I'm not going to disagree with that. I'm saying that I don't.
Well, I'm not saying that that's not the case. What strikes me is to me that is the very nature of Friday the 13th. And I remember Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert being really horrified by this stuff back in, the mid-'80s, right? And they were wringing their hands and trying to figure out what the hell is going on with the movies, because we have this new dead, horny teenager kind of genre where kids are going out in the woods and having sex and getting killed. I mean, they're ignoring the fact that there have been movies like that before. But Friday the 13th was a new, amazing thing. It had this folkloric feel where basically Jason is some kind of monster that comes after kids that are having sex. Now, what I thought was strange was, it's not how best to put this? There are not real people. If you actually, you don't for a moment say mourn these different kids who get killed by Jason. Maybe you wind up rooting for the final girl at the end of every movie, but the rest of them are really just sort of symbols of something that Jason is going after. And it's strange to me that slasher films exist this way to chew up humans, imaginary humans, and there's never an attempt to try to make those humans make sense on like a human level. Because in real life, people die and you're torn up about it, and murders happen and it ruins lives. But in these movies, these murders happen and you just kind of go on to the next one. And I always thought that was the weirdest thing about slasher movies, is that there's literally no value to these people's lives.
I don't know if that's true that's definitely true of the Friday the 13th movies, which are definitely more about, let's set up a series of crazy makeup effects and,
right.
Bump off people. But like, I think the Nightmare movies, I will say, and this is the one compliment I think I will give them over the Jason movies, although I think they function on different levels. The Nightmare movies do tend to have more fully realized kids in them, whereas like the Friday the 13th movies have kids that are more like archetypes, except for Tommy Jarvis, who is awesome. But
I agree with that.
Which one was Tommy? Is he
Tommy Jarvis was the kid played by Corey Feldman in the first movie, and then he was played by some guy that I can't remember, whose name escapes me right now, and then the guy from Return of the Living Dead in the third outing of that character. But and I'm blanking on the names. I'm sorry, I didn't do my research.
But he wound up being the replacement hockey mask killer. But having said all that stuff I just said about the devaluing of human life and yada yada, these are the Freddy movies. I'm sorry, the Jason movies to me are just folklore. They're truly campfire tales. And God, you've never seen the woods look more beautiful than they do in the Friday the 13th movies. I mean, maybe it's because they're so cheap and they're just out in the woods, but boy, they look great.
I think Jason as a character, because you look at Leatherface and Michael Myers, who are obviously very similar to Jason, but Jason also extended, evolved like some of the ideas that were already present in those two characters and made them overt, which is you literally have a killer who is a supernatural being. And I don't think how this ties into Freddy and Pinhead and Chucky, who all came after them, I don't think those characters could have existed without Jason coming first.
Well, Michael Myers comes first, right? I mean,
Michael Myers comes first, but he's lightly supernatural. He is never implicitly supernatural. They never go out and say, this guy is something more than human. Jason, by the third movie, you have him on the slab. You have him by the final chapter, which is the fourth movie. You have him getting off of a slab in a morgue.
Yes.
That's not something they ever did with Michael Myers.
It's true.
Dude. Oh, go ahead. Because I've been chattering too much anyway. Go ahead. Anybody? I thought I interrupted Tony.
No.
Okay, I'll say this anyway. Jason Lives has the best opening of any of the pictures. I absolutely love the beginning of Jason Lives, which I think Drew once pointed out is like the beginning of a Universal horror movie, where they these guys who for some reason are in the graveyard and around Jason's body, basically lightning brings Jason back to life. A lightning.
Oh yeah, that one's fun actually. That one's really fun.
That one may be my favorite. But
yeah, that's Jason Lives, and I don't know, what is that, part 7? I can't remember. Let's be honest.
Part.
I have not sat down.
I want to say that's part 5, but I'm not good with numbers. I'm good with titles, so it's just like that's the third Tommy Jarvis one.
Right. Well, but that's at the beginning. Okay. Well, we'll work that out.
Let's talk about Freddy versus Jason.
Yeah.
Who did you root for? By the way, Jason, before who did you root for? You didn't say that.
Obviously, to me, Jason. I rooted for Jason because to me, Freddy, Jason once again is basically just a kind of a near mindless boogeyman, and in the same sense that I rooted for Godzilla, but it's not like Godzilla is going to avoid stepping on you or me. So in Godzilla versus the Mutos here, Freddy versus Jason. I'm definitely voting for Jason. Freddy, though, is way more disturbing. I mean, Freddy is actually a sadistic pedophile, who is really extraordinarily cruel. And so I enjoyed watching Freddy more, but I rooted for Jason to finally kill him. And okay, explain something to me, because Ronnie Yu comes in. And by the way, once again, Ronnie Yu, this is the guy who made The Bride with White Hair and The Bride with White Hair 2, which are extraordinarily cool supernatural martial arts movies that you just have to see to believe. But he made those. He comes in here. How much of this stuff at the beginning is all new? I mean, because this movie actually literally begins with exposition from Freddy Krueger. Is this new stuff, or are they reusing footage from the prior film?
Most of that's stock footage from old Nightmare and Elm Street movies.
What about Englund, Robert Englund, sounds makeup, working down in his boiler room?
That's new stuff.
Okay. So, yeah, we open with really an introduction to the Freddy universe, with narration from Robert Englund. We see him when he's still alive. Basically, they give us the origin story of Freddy Krueger. He is groundskeeper Willie from The Simpsons, essentially, and but he's a pedophile. He's got a boiler room. This movie actually, by the way, is fairly squeamish about the fact that he's a pedophile. He's described as just being a child killer. I mean, sometimes I think there's even a sanitized nature to this film, a little bit.
I would go for that, actually. I mean, for as much gore
that's something they do a lot that's something they started backing away from a lot in a lot of the Nightmare movies, and really only kind of went back whole on the hog with in the remake.
Yeah, which I did not see. I haven't seen.
It's not worth seeing other than that.
That's fascinating. And that's funny that our sensibilities are such that we can have Freddy Krueger, we can have him be a killer, we can have him kill children, but somehow this bad guy who deserves to die, we can't think of him as being a child molester. That's interesting. I'm not saying that's wrong. I totally get the idea. People go, well, why be exploitative, when it's not necessary? But I do find it fascinating that they've backed off on how horrible Freddy is or was. And Darren is pointing out that Jason Lives is number 6. So thank you. I'm so glad that we have a chat room. That's awesome. So we were talking about Ronnie Yu coming into this. I really loved the style here. I have to say, I assume this was all done in, I don't know, but if this is done in California, it sure looks a lot like Halloween, because you have those. This
was filmed in Canada.
Ah, okay. You have those enormous hedges, that you have these enormous trees. I don't know if the woods are fake. I literally have no idea, but there's a stylishness to it. It looks like a nice picture. I was impressed by the look. So, all right, we talked about Freddy being a murderer and a satirist. Satirist, I'm sorry.
He's a satirist?
Well, that too.
Wait a minute.
What's that? Yeah.
He's a satirist?
He's a satirist. Yeah, he has a column from the New York Times.
What's the
Freddy
New Yorker?
Krueger and William Sapphire. Boy. Yeah, you never took two greater guys to brunch than Freddy Krueger and William Sapphire. But yes. But one thing that I thought was really fascinating is Jason. We were talking about how Jason is a lot like I said he was like Godzilla. Drew, tell me more about your theory that Jason is essentially a child having a temper tantrum. Because
it's funny you mentioned Godzilla, but Jason has a lot of the same appeal as Godzilla to kids. Is this idea that you can be in this oversized body, you can be running around, you can be rampaging, and you don't have to actually answer to anybody.
Yeah.
Except, in his mind, Jason actually does have to answer to his mom. But, that's not as literal. That's not as literal in most of these movies as it is here. But
this is like an extreme manipulation of that moment in, I don't remember which, in the past you've had various final girls get the brilliant ideas to just simply pretend to be Jason's mom, and he always gets momentarily confused by that. So in this one, clearly they're thinking about it, and they go, hey, that's one, magic card I can play against Jason is I can pretend to be mom, and so that's what...
And I actually think that's really clever. I think that is a really, first of all, a clever way to set up an antagonism between Jason and Freddy, because, Jason's mom is obviously sacred territory to Jason. But, Jason is essentially an oversized child.
Yeah.
And, that's what I really love the makeup here, because they make him literally the adult version of the child Jason we see in the original Friday the 13th, with the same shape of the head and everything.
Yeah,
but
that's right.
It's,
how many times have we seen Jason's physical head underneath the hockey mask?
Well, the Jason makeup changes pretty much from movie to movie. He doesn't have the consistent look that Freddy has had. I mean, there's the hockey mask. The hockey mask didn't even show up until part 3.
Right.
He's not had a very consistent look. It's very fluid.
Well, sometimes I noticed the hockey mask is designed so that it seems to literally be embedded in the soft tissue of his head.
Yeah, that's Jason Goes to Hell, or as I like to call him, the Meatball Jason.
And in others, he seems to have a more or less normal head. In this one, they've established that Jason is a profoundly, he definitely as a child has these terrible deformations. He has a large head. He has one eye that's closed. He has a terrible, malformed mouth. So that he's an unpleasant-looking child. We don't know if he's also developmentally delayed or if he's just an innocent.
Well, that's been pretty much the assumption of. Man, I feel like I'm fanning out all over this podcast.
That's why you're here, right?
Yeah.
That's why we're covering this. It is the Drew Halloween Man retrospective. So I don't think you have to make any apologies about that.
Go.
The Jason as a child has always been assumed, even though we don't really get into his backstory into the movies as much as we do. We're given a lot more of it here actually than we are in a lot of the other movies. It's usually just hearsay and campfire stories. But he was born deformed. Most fans assume that he was probably developmentally challenged as well. And he had this overbearing, overprotective mom who worked at the summer camp. And they play that stuff up really well here, and I actually think it is the thing that I do find fascinating, because with the Freddy character being the way he is, and this is why I always say that this is a dumb movie, because I love this movie, but it is a dumb movie, and I'm not going to apologize for that. This is a dumb movie actually ending up having some smart subtext, because what we have here is essentially an abuser of children fighting an overgrown child. And I think that is why Freddy versus Jason is more perfect than, say, Freddy versus Pinhead.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Okay.
I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, because that would be a sadist versus a sadist. You're totally right.
Yeah.
I do think it's interesting that, we haven't talked about the final fight yet, but we chase a bunch of mortals around, basically, just like with Godzilla. We chase a bunch of mortals around so that we have something to do with our time, and they are constantly sort of trying to keep track of what, they're fighting one monster or they're fighting another all the time. And
I love the part where the stoner character actually has to tell the cop, which actually for one moment makes him one of the smartest horror film characters of all time. He tells the cop, the reality rules are off.
Right.
Because, frankly,
I love that guy. He has
I can't stand that guy. I don't see how.
why is this character patterned after Jason Mewes? What's going on with that?
I think they thought that would be. They thought, why not? I don't know. It's that man. I really like. This is another thing I dislike about this movie. So they spend all this money on kind of, to me, just a gag that's like goes the most obvious and kind of stupidest way, which is the caterpillar Freddy creature, which crawls into his mouth in not as good a way as the exit mouth from Poltergeist, which looks awesome. The CG it's good CG, it's okay CG, it doesn't look great. And then, so they spent all that money and then decided to chintz on the part where he gets cut in two, where it looks like they cut a ventriloquist dummy in two. Awful. And you see it laying there, and it just looks like a ventriloquist. You're like, man, is there any way you could have cut that stupid caterpillar? Oh, look, dude, he's getting stoned with the caterpillar. It's just like the Alice in Wonderland. Like, any way you could have cut that and made actual practical effects that looked better? Because obviously, I mean, there's good practical effects in this thing. Jason looks awesome. Freddy looks awesome. There's great kills. There's practical effects everywhere. But it's like, man, you just had this really, in my opinion, kind of crappy scene. And then the scene following that where you're like, oh, yeah, here's some gore, some real practical gore. And it looks ridiculous. And every time, this is why friends of mine hate CG, and I can't blame them when you see stuff like this, because the gag, it's not even clever, really.
I find that scene troubling for different totally fanboy reasons, because I don't know whether I want to give that kill to Jason or Freddy.
Hey, that's pretty good, actually. But yeah, I mean, the whole
really
the stoner got stoned thing, it's just like, really? This is why they make fun of that in Cabin in the Woods, because it's I guess it's part of
so good point. I mean, I was wondering, is it even possible? In this movie, they go out of their way just to go ahead and make all the dialogue from the teenagers be extraordinarily stupid. This movie opens up with a party, right? With the teenagers having a party, the parents are wherever the hell the parents are, and the teenagers are just literally the most annoying, stupid teenagers I have ever seen. There's a few girls and they're saying, stupid teenager stuff, and then boys come over and one of them is an asshole and one of them is a dork, and all their dialogue is such that really these are not humans to kill. These are I agree with Drew at this point. They're totally cannon fodder. You literally, and when the first boy to get killed is the one who's a total jerk to his girlfriend, and you're like,
And he actually probably has the worst death in the whole movie, with excluding what actually ends up happening to Freddy.
As far as deaths go, that one is pretty good. Although
that's one of my favorite Jason kills in the entire series. To be honest, I just think that's amazing and beautiful, and it's
backwards in the trundle bed or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, strangely, actually, I think this movie is kind of not that scene, but like this movie is kind of pretty, and it's in a weird way, which is an odd thing to say about a movie about Freddy versus Jason. But like I really like the color scheme.
I'll have to give you that. Like, there's some good cinematography. Like, that's the one thing I think, for as much of a mess as I think this movie is, getting Ronnie Yu to do cool action things and make a movie look good, like, that's totally cool. Because I think he did that in an amazing way.
I agree, and I think that's why this works as spectacle, because it is really visually rich. If I can say that about a film like this, it's remarkably well. It's got visual depth to it. It looks.
You mean
really
like the dream sequences and stuff like that?
I think Ronnie Yu adds something to it. I think this is the director's touch.
Yeah, my favorite.
I think that's really good.
Is Jason on fire, just cutting through fools. That scene, I'll watch that. I'll watch that because, man, that gets completely insane. It's like he's caught on fire and he's just wreaking havoc. If anything goes Jason, that's
set up
what I
dialogue
want to see.
that is so like it remind and I'm not, when I say these things, I'm not mocking it. This is the way this movie operates. But you've got these two jerkwads. They're drinking Everclear, okay? And just so they let us know, there's no, nothing can be left to chance in this film. It's just like, Krusty the Clown on The Simpsons going, look at this pail right next to the door, so that you know what's coming. They go, oh, this Everclear is so strong, like anybody has to comment on how hard it is to drink Everclear, right? And then, so Jason comes out, they throw it on him, and they set him on fire. Awesome. Now we know.
I love the one the Letterman jacket guy that actually decides to put his hands on Jason, thinking that he's some drunk redneck. Only it's like him getting his head twisted, the instant karma of that. And this is one of the things you're talking about, that like the way people react, and particularly in Jason movies. You are rooting for Jason because most of the time you relate more to Jason because as a horror fan, and that we kind of talked about this last week with Nightbreed.
Yeah.
You are most horror fans are the outsider type, the oddball, the misfit. And Jason very much epitomizes that. So like when you have this like guy in a Letterman's jacket who very much probably represents the guy that you did not like in high school, or maybe the guy you currently don't like as you are still in high school, and you are able to like reach down, put yourself in Jason's place and be like, man, wouldn't it be great if I could just annihilate all these guys? And
but isn't that what makes these sort of pictures work? And that's even going back to Happy Birthday to Me, Terror Train, any of these sorts of movies you go, it's always those douchebaggy guys that you go, man, that guy needs to get what's coming to him. And you watch it kind of happen, and that's the origin of a lot of these kind of pictures.
Well, I think it's also great that this exists because humans are angry creatures some of the time, so it's great that we have the safe outlet to go have our. Jason is a child having a temper tantrum, and there's nothing more unreasonable than an angry child. So it's great that our inner child gets to go have these temper tantrums in fiction instead of having for it to spill out into the real world.
So let's get to the final fight. We got
to do the dream sequence fight.
Okay,
I feel like that's
I agree. Okay, the final fight is really, to me, built up in two parts. There's the dream part, and then the real world part. In other words, they trade off. The two monsters trade off whose territory they're going to fight in. But to me, I have to point out that we kept saying this like Godzilla, and in a sense, you really need the guy from Godzilla here going, let them fight, because that's. That in the end, that's what's going to happen. They basically decide that. Right. But unfortunately, almost essentially everybody before then gets totally killed. We may be rooting for Jason, but boy, if you're one of these punk ass, just regular characters along the way, Jason is as likely to kill you as Freddy, and maybe more so.
Especially when Freddy's using him because. There's clever stuff, like the whole thing where Freddy's using Jason and the way that he's using him, going through his mother. Like, that's the thing, that's why I dislike it the way I do. And I don't hate it, but, because there's some really good stuff. But to me, it's just so inconsistent. Like, the good stuff, but it's like there's this clear delineation between, man, that's pretty cool, and just oh, God, that really... That's the dialogue. That's the action sequence. That stuff butts right up against each other constantly, and that's I think what's kind of frustrating about it. But the fights are really good. And that's I guess that's the thing that frustrates me the most is all the good bits are hey, that's pretty cool, and the bad bits are truly just abysmal.
So, okay, Drew, set us up. This the first part of the final fight, which is the fight inside the dream sequence.
Well, the kids come up with this plan essentially that they actually no. Freddy comes across possesses the stoner kid, comes across some horse tranquilizer essentially, and tricks Jason into getting close enough to him for him to drug him. The kids now come up with the brilliant plan that they are going to take the now drugged up Jason back to Camp Crystal Lake, and they're going to somehow drag Freddy out of the dream world, and the two monsters will then fight it out, and they can run and hide. And
now, I know we're about to talk about the fight inside the music, but
what we essentially have set up with the first part of this is something that when they first started talking about this movie after Jason Goes to Hell came out way back in the day, what every junior high school horror fan wanted to see, which is a Jason nightmare. And so we get to see Jason fight Freddy in the dream world.
Right. And that dream world involves, interestingly, a lot of what we see already, that Freddy's kind of figured out how Jason, at least in this movie, how his brain works. You know, we're going to say, hey, there's bad kids in this town, and Jason sees a whole succession of them, you know. So, you know, like all talking to him, I deserve to be killed, I deserve. He associates them with the teenagers who abandoned him when he was being abused as a child. So now in his dream world is an amazing, like, weird, dreamy version of Crystal Lake that is full of water, you know, and there are dead teenagers just rolling by the door. I mean, it's a remarkable vision of what
I love about this fight scene, though, that we get is that I don't, you know, initially what you have is Freddy comes out in the form of Jason's mom and taunts him and kind of berates him, and Jason actually lowers his head and looks like a kid being scolded, and you know that's all good stuff.
Listen,
and then,
I'm sorry for Jason.
yeah. Well, I think you're supposed to. So mission accomplished. And then Freddy reveals himself, which of course riles Jason up. You know, I guess you know even in his pea brain he realizes he's been had, and I don't think Jason realizes he's dreaming because I don't think Jason actually sleeps too often at the very least. So the two of them go at it, and, you know, Jason starts chopping Freddy to bits, and because it's a dream, Freddy just reconstitutes instantly. And Freddy, you know, then, you know, says, you know, welcome to my nightmare, and starts tossing Jason around telekinetically and beating him up. But Freddy actually starts to get frustrated because he realizes no matter what he does to Jason, Jason has this wonderful resilience that we all know him for. Jason can't die.
He won't die, he won't die. The way Freddy's powers work, if I understand them correctly, and I've seen some of these movies, but you know, is like, I'm Freddy, you Drew, go to sleep. If I manage to kill you in your dream, then you die, right?
Yes,
that's the way the power works.
But Jason will not die.
You are Jason Voorhees. You go to sleep, I go into your dream, I kill you, and you die, except for the problem is that I can't kill you because you can't die. You know, in other words, you have exactly the same properties in your dream life as you do in the real life, and luckily you're Jason Voorhees, and apparently you're immortal. So I can just, you know, so basically Freddy's going to be frustrated as long as he keeps trying to kill Jason Voorhees in his dream.
The two of them go at it, tossing each other around for a bit until some water starts spilling, which triggers, I guess, Jason's memory of drowning, which is the first way he died. And Jason reverts. Freddy figures this out, and Jason reverts into the little boy Jason from the first movie. And Freddy, I guess, practically has his the best thing that's ever happened to him. It might as well have been wrapped up in a Christmas bow. He has a little kid he can torture indefinitely because he can't die, so he can just kill him and kill him and kill him over and over again. I kind of wonder if they had just let this be, if there just would have been stalemate for eternity, but that's either here nor there.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That he, you know, when he turns, it is truly awful. When he turns Jason into, you know, he's a little boy and he's just yelling at him, you know, you do feel very badly for him. But it's in. Oh, I remember now. Jason wakes up because, if I recall, he gets thrown and bashes into a tree. And so he wakes up and he just disappears right out of Freddy's.
Well, they have this great sequence where it's his origin story essentially, but amped up on Freddy drugs. You know, he's being tormented by all these kids and gets pushed into the water, and then Freddy's in the water holding him under, and then
and he wakes up.
Yeah.
So that brings us into really the second half of the fight. Is all that's left to have a big physical fight, which is one major thing that you're waiting for. Because now you've been waiting for two things. You've been waiting for a fight inside the Jason Dream world, and now you're waiting for the real monster, what you were calling the monster rally, the real physical fight between these two in our world. But to do that, you have to accomplish something that I wasn't aware that you could do, which is that you have to bring Freddy Krueger physically back into our world. Freddy, who is a dead guy, who got killed years ago and whose body, in theory, was buried a long time ago in some grave somewhere.
Right, or just burned to ash or whatever.
Yeah, so how does this work? Can Freddy be brought into the real world? Has that ever happened?
Yeah, no, that's something they've done in several movies.
Okay. Yeah. So what's the rule? How do you do it?
You just grab a hold of them and wake up.
When you wake up.
Yeah. Exactly.
It seems to be as simple as grab onto him while you're waking up, and Freddy will come into the real world, which is kind of neat. You know, again, these sort of simple rules have a certain folkloric effect to them. You know, and darn it, I love Robert Englund's look when he realizes that he's accidentally wound up in the real world. That's awesome, because he suddenly looks at his own hand and he's like, you know. It's this sort of amazement, and so then he starts, you know.
Robert Englund, I have to say, and it's very sad to me that this is the last time he's going to play Freddy. He's really good. I think he does a good job of straddling the sort of crypt keeper version of Freddy Krueger that we have, and then the scarier one from the earlier movies. I feel like that he walks a pretty fine line here. Even though he isn't given a lot of great dialogue, he again, that look on his face, that sort of oh crap look, and Robert Englund knows he's playing a cad every time he puts on that fedora and sweater. So I think he kind of knows that there's a certain segment of the audience that really wants to see him tossed around the way he gets tossed around here.
Yeah. He is very good. He is really good. Who played him who plays Freddy in the remake?
It's Jackie Earl Haley. Yeah, it's Rorschach. Yeah. And he's actually, I will say, he's actually decent, but it's not a good movie.
Right. I almost want to see it just to see how they do the remake. But and ladies and gentlemen, that's why they reboot series, is because even those of us who know better will be going, well, I'm curious as to how they're going to reboot that. Jackie Earl Haley, who was so awesome at Bad News Bears Breaking Training. Okay, so yes, we have this final fight. Now Freddy's in the real world, and and I was amazed, by the way, in the real world how resilient Freddy turns out to be. When he's a physical person who doesn't have the ability to, say, fly or anything like that, all he has is just literally his wits, and the, strength and agility of a normal person. A normal person who's capable of doing a certain amount of like WWE style fighting, because there are sometimes when Freddy is jumping up and doing these pile drivers on Jason and stuff like that, but generally he's just a human guy who's fighting a much taller guy, and he comes up with all kinds of cool stuff. They set up this amazing set piece that includes an enormous metal slide and a giant metal cement mixer suspended on chains that's swinging around. There's various things that Freddy can throw at Jason, and cause all kinds of havoc. It's a good fight. I mean,
Freddy reminds me a lot of Wile E. Coyote in the sequence. He keeps getting these I'll use this, because anytime Jason gets a hold of Freddy, it's bad news. Jason's slower, I actually think the way they thought this out, because Ronnie Yu's conception of Jason was that he wanted to have him like Rocky in the Rocky movies, where it's just somebody that just can get the crap beat out of him, but will keep coming at you, and which is fair. That's kind of Jason's thing. Like, you can beat the crap out of Jason. Jason will not stop.
Right.
Freddy, he's shorter, he's nimbler, he's kind of got a Jackie Chan / Looney Tunes thing going on. But I think the way they thought out their fighting styles was actually really, really interesting and fun. It's cool to watch. Because, I mean, you do have Jason, this sort of human bulldozer.
Yeah.
Freddy keeps tossing stuff at him, and Jason just is like, well, that's not going to do anything, buddy, but take your time.
Yeah, he's basically just annoyed. When Freddy drops, 100 rebar over Jason and, pins him, it's essentially just annoying, because one doesn't get the impression, if Jason feels pain, he doesn't experience it the way the rest of us do. I mean,
well, how would you think about pain if you knew it had no repercussions? And I think that's the thing. I think that's the why Freddy gets that oh crap look, is that he knows the tables have suddenly turned. Right. I mean, in the dream world, he can torment Jason all he wants, and he's got the home field advantage. In the physical world, Freddy holds his own. I'm not going to say that he doesn't, but I mean, every time Jason actually gets a hold of him, Freddy gets pretty brutalized.
Really that this whole idea that if you were essentially invulnerable, so that no matter what torture you came through, your body would rebuild itself, you're going to keep ticking, then you're right. If you were experiencing physical pain, it might be truly awful, but you don't have the existential threat piece of it that humans feel. We feel terrible pain, but we also feel deep down a feeling that, maybe this will kill me. But if you're Jason, yeah, you're right. It's just, maybe you can just sort of power through it. He manages to find his way out of the rebar, I think, by getting blasted away from it by the swinging cement mixer or whatever. And he just keeps coming. To be honest with you, once we're in the real world, it's a foregone conclusion that Jason is going to get the crap beat out of him for about half an hour, and then eventually he's going to tear Freddy Krueger apart. There are humans here, and they're the ones who actually behead Freddy, but that's only because sort of the opportunity just happens to present itself to them.
Well, I mean, if we're going, this is jumping ahead in the conversation, but if we're going to say who wins, you have to be a pretty strident, hardcore Freddy fan to actually say that he wins, because let's face it, Jason impales Freddy with his own arm.
Yeah, right.
That is victory, my friend.
Yeah. Well, I think it's when people say, who do you think would win? I mean, it's obvious, and they set this up this way. Like, Freddy's always going to win in the dream world, except, of course, Jason's more resilient than that. And Jason, I mean, come on. In the real world, Freddy was a child molester, not a particularly, he wasn't, buff. He wasn't, he was a janitor at this place. So it kind of is. And regardless, I mean, they set it up as kind of, kung fu and a little bit slapstick and, action movie, because it wouldn't really be fun if Freddy just took his machete and went, whoop, and that was the end of Freddy, right? We can't have that. That's pretty crappy and anticlimactic. But, I mean, come on. In reality, I think each one, that's why it's almost a draw, because I think each one won in their respective hunting ground.
I will grant you that Freddy wins in the dream world. He breaks Jason by finding his primal fear. But I mean, that's why you want to watch a movie like this.
Sure,
you want to see that stuff.
Yeah. So yes, that's definitely the question of who won. I want to talk a little bit about the star Kane Hodder, and then we should probably honestly get to our final thoughts, and then come around for endorsements, because otherwise, because this one's going to go long. So, all right, the cast. England, who's been playing Freddy since the beginning of that series, is here, and it's his last time out. We said that's very sad, but still, But Kane Hodder, who's the most famous Jason, doesn't get to play Jason. Is there, how do we feel about that, and why have they recast Jason here?
I've heard a lot of different stories about this, things ranging from Ronnie Yu wanting somebody that was even taller than Kane Hodder, which I've met Kane Hodder. Kane Hodder is extremely tall, so
right.
it's hard for me to imagine how much taller this guy, Ken Krinzinger, I cannot pronounce his last name, Ken Krinzinger. Yeah. And I've also heard things as simple as that New Line wanted to save money on the budget, and Kane was more expensive, and this guy actually is from Canada, so they used him. The guy that plays Jason here actually was a stunt double for Kane Hodder in Jason Takes Manhattan, so he does have experience playing Jason, and he's got a lot of the Kane Hodder, because Kane Hodder as Jason has a lot of very specific body mannerisms, and this guy does a good job of mimicking a lot of them. But I will say this, as a hardcore Jason fan, the first time I saw this, it was a little jarring. And a lot of people are like, it's a guy in a hockey mask. How can you tell the difference?
Yeah,
I can tell the difference.
What is the difference in how Jason, say, in Friday the 13th Part 3 moves versus?
Well, Friday the 13th Part 3, and 2 are very different, because in those movies Jason can run. And that's something we didn't see again until the remake. And, the Jason here is very, and this is my personal theory on this. The Jason here is very Boris Karloff, Frankenstein. And I think Ronnie Yu knew you had to have somebody to root for. There had to be a quote-unquote hero. See how I tied that back into the retrospective? There had to be a quote-unquote hero, and so he kind of painted a picture of Jason as this more Frankenstein's monster kind of character, whereas Kane, and I think Kane could have done everything that is done in this movie. So I, if that's the rationale behind it, I think that's a mistake. But, I still think it should have been Kane at the end of the day, because Kane that's who fans wanted to see. But
I did like how fast in the remake for Friday the 13th, which I did see, and I saw at the drive-in, by the way, which was awesome. But I did like how fast he was in that movie. I liked how Jason just comes on just extraordinarily fast and hard. Actually a lot like Michael in the zombie remake of Halloween, which we've all talked about ad nauseum, considering that we've never done.
But I don't know that we're ever really going to get a good reason because there's so many conflicting stories. I don't know that we're ever really going to get the actual reason as to why Kane Hodder wasn't in this. Kane has gone on to be in Hatchet movies, where she's essentially playing a Jason-like character, and that's great. But I would have loved to see a version of this with Kane in it. Having said that, I do like the Jason that we have in this movie. I think he's very cool. He looks cool. I think, the guy, playing Jason, Ken, he does a good job. Where he has enough of the sort of Kane Hodder body language that it doesn't feel alien from all of the stuff that has come before this. But in the back of my mind, as a hardcore fan, you just want Robert Englund versus Kane Hodder, because that's what you dreamed about since you were in junior high. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, so we can throw it open to whatever we want, because I want to come around to final thoughts. But is there anything else that's any other topics that I may have missed that we should?
Well, why do we like movies like this? Why do movies like this exist? Why are there movies where we pit monster against monster? Because this is not the first movie like this, nor will it be the last. This is part of a long tradition.
I can't really imagine what else there's going to be. But it's a good point. I think these movies are rare, though, now. I don't think that...
Bull. We had 2 Alien versus Predator movies after that. I would actually argue that all of the Underworld movies are based off of the same concept.
I would actually agree with that. I think it's a fundamental thing. I think it's the sort of thing that we all grow up as boys. Largely, it's definitely a male-dominated sort of thing. It kind of starts in our imagination when we're really young. It's like it starts with us. It may have started with what universal monster would be awesome against the other universal monster, and we sort of grew up with early films that inspired that, like Wolfman versus Frankenstein versus Dracula versus kind of whatever. And I think that and it was reinforced by many of the monster pictures coming out of Japan. I think that there's a natural sort of feeling to kind of want to see two awesome things go at each other, and it really, I think it informs spectacle. I think whenever you see a movie like this, it's going to be a fight, and it may not matter. I think, in fact, I would probably argue that you can't judge this kind of picture by story or anything else, because really you're there to see a fight, and you're really there to kind of watch your kind of best sort of impressions, your best, most imaginative combat moments kind of come together, and you want to be surprised by whatever the filmmakers are going to throw at you that maybe you didn't quite expect. And you're right. The human casualties are simply that. They're usually the people in the front row who, when somebody gets thrown over the ropes, they're going to get taken out. And that's completely fine, because somebody has to kind of have their blood spilled if these two can't. And typically that's, it's somebody who's somewhat inconsequential. Because really the story is entirely about these two Gorgons who are going to duke it out. And I think maybe because of it, this sort of picture cannot be judged in the same way that you judge even films of the same genre, like genre, or the same franchise, because they are exclusive, exclusive in their own milieu. And I think that's probably good, which is why I think this is the kind of movie you have to see in a group, and you have to see it at a theater, and better yet, in a situation like the Alamo, where it's been set up in a way where, you're already in a heightened sense of, anticipation, and you just kind of want to see it. A fight, when you watch two fighters fight on TV, it's fine and interesting, but it's nothing compared to being like in the ring, and you don't really give a crap about what the story is. You're kind of seeing these two, gargantuans kind of go at each other. And I think the same is true here. And I think if you judge it on those terms, it takes on its own sort of, its own sort of charm, its own sort of
like Rocky
thing.
Horror, like it has to be an experience. You're saying, or it gets better the more it's an experience.
And I think that's true, because you can watch Rocky Horror at home, and it's kind of hum. But when you go and people are flinging toast at the screen, it becomes an entire. You're caught up in the spirit and the energy and the zeitgeist of it, and then it becomes like, it becomes like not a video game, because that's not right, but it becomes like a Roman gladiatorial kind of combat. And I think that's deeply rooted in sort of our psyche. But also you've got these two characters that are so clearly rooted in popular culture that you're itching to see this kind of fight. The 10-year-old boy in you wants to see this, even though the 10-year-old boy wouldn't be allowed in the theater. But when you kind of see it, you go, well, that was kind of awesome. It's just unfortunate. When you see it in a movie, you sort of expect that it's going to follow, it's going to have a good script, it's going to have something, it's going to, so maybe it's unfair to judge it that way. But I think it's ingrained in us to want to see, it starts with dinosaurs. I want to see a Triceratops fight a Tyrannosaurus Rex because it's awesome. And it just is. And it starts with play, and then with play fighting, and then with, heroes and monsters. And then, I think it's just an extension of that, just a much bloodier extension of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It feeds something in us, I think, more than just the campfire stories that may have spawned the first Jason movie.
I think there's something to your idea that it is best experienced in some special way where the movie is really just a part of the overall experience. That there's something to the idea of like watching it with friends or whatever, and being, what Drew talked about, had that happen with a number of movies where we've all looked forward to something for a long time, and frankly, how good the movie is almost beside the point to the experience itself. And that's absolutely true. And that's one of the drawbacks, I think, to home video is that home video does give you the entire movie, but you lose out on the experience of watching a movie that often came with.
I will have to say, a couple of button-up-a-thons ago, I love Rollerball. Watching Rollerball is always cool. Watching Rollerball, and yes, I don't. Okay. There's no. That's the only one that exists.
I agree.
Fool ourselves. Watching Rollerball in a theater full of people yelling "Jonathan, Jonathan" is an entirely different experience than any time I watched it at home. In such a huge way that it's almost like there's certain times where you're like, this can't be as good whenever I watch it from here on out. It's still going to be a great movie, but it's certainly, watching it since then has been kind of a letdown as far as being there, also being there with a bunch of people that you kind of, you do want to be around. They're, gobba, hey, one of us,
Yeah.
There's absolutely something to what you guys are saying. Don't get me wrong, but maybe I just love Jason Voorhees too much because I watched this movie today, basically by myself, and I enjoyed it.
Did you see it in the theater? Did you see it in the theater first though?
Yeah.
That goes a long way. I've never seen it in the theater, so I have nothing to key in on that was even a. Yes, you love Jason Voorhees completely, but I think that you also can. I think that there's some truth to maybe keying into whatever your first experience was seeing it. You can have a great viewing or a terrible viewing. I can
watch this movie analytically and tell you what I don't like about it, though. But you like it. Right. And one of the reasons why I think you like it, apart from being a Jason Voorhees fan, is because I think you had a great first viewing of it.
I wonder.
I think I like Jason Voorhees too. I like Jason Voorhees too. I think my problem is the fact that I had a terrible first viewing of it because I looked at it solely as a picture, and there were things in it that I thought were interesting and some things that I liked, but in general, in sort of judging it, it didn't work for me, and part of it is because I didn't look at it as a spectacle, which I think part of it really is. For me,
maybe that's fair. It probably is. I really like this. From the moment we first see Jason stomping out of the mist, which is just a beautiful shot. I love. There's plenty of stuff about this movie that I think are good and they're on their own. That I would like. Look, the dialogue. I'm not going to say this isn't a dumb movie. I just feel like it's a smartly made dumb movie.
And it's much more smartly made than Jason Goes to Hell, which is also a dumb movie.
Well, Jason Goes to Hell is just a dumb movie. It only really gets by because it has some cool makeup effects in it. But that movie is far more disrespectful of the Jason character than this movie is.
Oh yeah,
I think that's
to me the only memorable thing about that movie, other than the fact I thought the opening was one of the dumbest things ever, where you have a bunch of trained cops getting in a circle and all shooting at each other. That's how it started for me, which is, that's a movie thing, but it's still that's where it started, where I was like, wow, that's really, really stupid. But then they call back to the Necronomicon
looking for Jason.
That's okay. But I hate that movie.
Even though he had all of this stupid exposition that he had to give us about, about Jason's black heart and all this stuff.
Look, Creighton Duke was a cool character. He was even in the comic series that I almost got the right for Friday the 13th. Yes, I almost got the right of Friday the 13th comic book series. True story. But Jason Goes to Hell is a stupid movie. It's stupid even by Friday the 13th standards, and I really do feel like it's disrespectful to Jason. I don't feel like this movie is disrespectful to Jason. I don't even feel like Jason X is disrespectful to Jason. Like, I don't like it when I feel like Jason's being disrespected, because I love the ugly puss.
Yeah.
It's a joke.
No, I'm with you. Okay, let's get final thoughts. Definitely. Okay, let's see. What order did we go? We should probably reverse the order. This time, let's do Adam, Tony, Drew, and then I'll just say a few words, and then we'll do our endorsements. So, Adam, final thoughts. Finest film of all time, Freddy vs. Jason. Lay it on us.
Well, maybe I had too high an expectation. I think I've said everything about it so I'm not going to say anything new that you're not expecting. I didn't care for it. Maybe I had too high expectations. Maybe I had a bad viewing. Maybe I couldn't see beyond some of the dumb to really kind of hold the picture up. But I didn't like it. But I would be totally willing to go to the Alamo and see it, at a summer camp at night in the like seeing Jaws in the water. I would, I'd be totally on board to do that, because that is completely the way to see it, and I'm open to seeing it in a crowd. So I think that's probably it. That's probably the thing that would
tell you what, Adam, come over to my apartment next time you're in Austin. We'll order a pizza. We'll get some Dr. Pepper. We'll watch this thing. I'll have some friends over. We'll watch this thing the way it's meant to be watched.
Yeah, if you can get like a dozen people over, I'm totally on board.
I can do that. I can do that.
All right, and I'll take you up on that, because I'm willing to take it in, because listen, I love both franchises. They both, from the beginning, they went crazy ways, but they started off really strongly, and I think they occupy a particular place, being a child of the '80s in particular. I think they definitely started in a place where I would like to see that rekindled in a way that would be kind of awesome. Like, I have my awesome two figures that will clash in this great, awesome battle, and this will all happen. So I'm totally on board with that. That's what I got.
Cool. All right, Tony, final thoughts.
I don't know. Like I said, I think it's kind of a mess of a movie. The great parts are really cool. Like I said, that part where Jason's on fire, just ripping stuff apart, is just awesome. The fights are obviously good. It's really well, there's a lot of great cinematography. It's just, to me, the parts, like the stoner guy and, just a bunch of the dialogue and just a bunch of the characters, too, just really don't work at all. And, in fact, if I hadn't seen it where I saw it and I had seen it like Adam, I would be firmly in his camp, too, of, screw this movie. Why am I even watching this thing? It just doesn't resonate in that same way, even though it's got a lot of good pieces. To me, the bad pieces totally blow those out in a way that if it wasn't for this retrospective, I never really look forward to really seeing this movie again. More so, though, I would never, ever, ever want to watch Jason Goes to Hell again, because that would be there's a billion different things, including reorganize.
So you'd much prefer if I said, Tony,
that.
we're stuck here waiting for somebody to show up. I got only 2 movies in front of me. You would definitely watch this before Jason Goes to Hell.
Oh, by leaps and bounds, like I said, I would catch a nap instead of watch Jason Goes to Hell again. I just really that movie. Other than haha, look, it's the Necronomicon. That's kind of funny. Oh, look, it's that horror movie thing.
Well, Jason, it has to be said, this movie would not exist without Jason Goes to Hell.
That is true. I will definitely, there's no doubt about that. So, hey, maybe that's, I guess, the one good thing we can say. Yay.
All right.
Thanks. But, yeah, it's not a movie I'm going to, And Drew and I agree a lot, but this one, I guess we disagree.
Sure. So, Drew, lay it on us. That's 2 down. Give us your final thoughts on.
Like I said, Freddy Krueger said that Jason has a face only a mother can love. That's not true, because I love Jason Voorhees, and I love the fact that we got to talk about this movie. I really do actually deeply enjoy this movie. In fact, I would go so far as to say, the comic that we are plugging through this retrospective, this is one of the things that I was trying to emulate when doing Halloween Man versus the Invisible Man. This is one of the things that I looked at. In fact, obviously every one of the movies that we've done has tied into that, but this being in particular a monster versus monster movie, there's a lot to draw on there, and I think this movie is so stylish and so fun. And actually talking about it, I'm probably going to watch it again after I get off the phone. I maybe all my taste is in my mouth. I don't know, but I really love this movie.
Outstanding.
I wish I had some appropriately Freddy quote about being a masochist.
Well, no,
There's something there, but I don't know.
No, listen, I was actually listening to your show not too long ago, and I forget which one of you said this. I really do. I was in the car because I'm driving on the 405, and I have nothing but charm in LA. So I was listening to your show, and somebody said, you should be allowed to love what you love.
That
sounds like me. Yeah.
And I'm like, this totally falls right into that camp. It's like,
sure.
You just love what you love, and that's awesome. And I wouldn't call it masochism. I wouldn't call it masochism at all, even though it didn't work for me. I could see where it totally works for you, and because it's why we're still talking about it. It's why there's still this franchise endures in some form or another. It just seems to work. You're allowed to love what you love.
I agree. Totally that was me, but I also that's one of the freeing parts of being an adult is we can discuss and we can kind of rib each other for this, but at the end of the day, I find it's pretty awesome that there's something that Drew is like, man, I'm going to watch this immediately after this podcast because I love it.
Completely, which makes this podcast
cool
and this subject and this topic super relevant. Because,
Well, I really hope we do get to. I really hope we do get to come back around to my boy Jason at some other point.
I want to because there's a lot of for all the.
I think it's a fantastic idea.
Guff given this one, I think there's some. Yeah, you can't get much more iconic modern monster than Jason.
Boy, what would it be like if we just decided to do the whole set, 13 weeks?
Oh, God, I think Julia's head would explode, but I would be so happy.
Anyway, okay. Let's see. Did we get everybody? Drew? Did I get Drew?
Yeah, I just got done.
Okay, so that's right. Well, no, we end up cross-talking so much, and I can't remember who I didn't call on. Okay, all right. Right, we had the two down, then we had me. So I have nothing else to say. For Pete's sake, I actually enjoyed this movie, and I loved the on-the-noseness of it. To me, it was an enjoyable picture. But the one I'm actually probably going to go back and watch some Friday the 13th after this, and honestly, probably go back and watch Bay of Blood, the Mario Bava movie that
wow
laid some of the groundwork. It's available on VOD. I just came across it. We can.
You're the one who actually turned me on to more of a going back to Mario Bava. So I think that's great that you pulled that one out.
Well, Bay of Blood, and Tony and I saw this at some midnight festival sometime or another. But it's a slasher flick that precedes Friday the 13th by a few years, and but it's really an honest to God, slasher flick. Bunch of people being killed in the cul-de-sac. Good stuff. Also known as Twitch of the Death Nerve. That is not my endorsement, although I guess it's one of them. Let's do the endorsements. So I don't know. We'll go Tony, Adam, Drew, and then I'll go again. Tony, do you have anything to endorse this week?
I'm going to have two endorsements, and it makes me kind of sad because I don't think I can afford either of them, and I hope that they don't sell out because that would make me also even more sad. Somehow we need to get on the screeners list for this awesome stuff. But they just announced, relevant to last week, the director's cut of Nightbreed on Blu-ray, and there's like a special edition and then a super special edition, which I'm hoping I can save up for before it sells out. And 1,000, there's like a few thousand copies. I want to say 2,000 or 3,000. I can't remember which. 1,000 of those, if you buy those through Shout Factory, come with a poster, and so that's going to be really cool. And if you buy the super, the deluxe one, it's got an extra disc full of stuff. So they've spent time restoring it. I don't know how much more. Like when I saw it, the VHS elements were definitely, you could tell, were VHS elements. Who knows how much they've restored them? I'd like to see comparisons, but you can pre-order that, and that I'm gonna, one way or another, I'm getting that. Whether or not I get the super duper one remains to be seen. That, and there's also a super ultra special edition of Possession, which I have, which includes like a soundtrack and a really great case. And a friend of mine has one, and I'm kind of.
And if you don't know Possession, you've got to see that crazy movie. It's insane. That is a crazy movie starring Sam Neill and Isabella Johnson.
I think we've just discussed it. To me, it's like the best Clive Barker-y thing that was not ever made by Clive Barker. And I mean that as a compliment to everything and everyone involved in that. Like, it just has that vibe, and it's out of control. It's great. Yeah. But there's a super special edition of that, too. And I'm hoping they don't run out before I can save my ducats, because I really, really want that a lot. So those are my endorsements, because just such cool stuff coming out, and that Nightbreed cut just has me. I need to get that.
So, Adam, do you have anything to endorse this week?
I actually don't this week. I don't have anything right offhand. That I just started playing Watch Dogs, which is a recent release, but I'm not into it enough really yet to really fully endorse it. But it is new and it is different, and I'm sort of liking it. So I'm sort of pre-endorsing. So,
all right.
But I have nothing really on the deck.
All right. Drew, anything this week?
Well, actually, I've been revisiting all the David Tennant Doctor Who stuff on Netflix. My wife Jamie, who a lot of you listeners will remember is on the show frequently, has just kind of now learning Doctor Who, and I like most people, I didn't subject her to the stuff from my childhood, which would have been the stuff from the 80s, but I started her on the Eccleston stuff, and she likes that well enough. But somewhere during the season when Martha first came in, she's become actively engaged in this universe, and it's been fun watching it through her as somebody who did not grow up with this crazy, by American standards, sci-fi universe. And also just, I really, I'd forgotten how much I like David Tennant as the Doctor. Like, I said it on Facebook earlier today. I actually think the 10th Doctor, or I believe he's the 10th, or is he the 11th? I don't know. Again, numbers, my kryptonite.
Tennant was known as the 10th Doctor, yeah.
Okay, well, he's the guy, he doesn't come from a comic book, but he may be one of my favorite superheroes. I really like this guy. And he's very swashbuckling, but I also like his strong pacifistic streak as well. It's just fun stuff, and it's even some of the weaker seasons are still kind of fun to watch. And Daleks, my all-time favorite space aliens. So I don't know, just good stuff. I would be foolish not to be selfish, though, yet again, and say, because this whole retrospective, and this has been a fun retrospective for me, because we've been able to do some of my absolute favorite movies, but Halloween Man versus the Invisible Man on Comixology right now by Monsterverse. However, you should actually, I was talking to one of our regular listeners earlier, you should actually take a look at all of the Halloween Man stuff that's up there. We have 2 issues of the regular series. There's going to be the new issue up on the 7th. So there's one coming out of that. There's the Halloween Man versus Hack Slash special. All of these issues, they're very, very long by today's standards. They're like the smallest thing we've got up there is 60 pages. We have them ranking up to like 106 pages, and they're all $1.99. So if you're a comic fan, there's a lot of good stuff. And it's funny considering some of the weird subject matter we take on. I keep hearing comic book fans say they miss comics that are fun. Halloween Man is fun. If you like fun comics, read Halloween Man. You can read it on Comixology right now. Like, get done listening to this, go read Halloween Man. Let me know what you think, either on our message board or on the Halloween Man message board on Facebook. That's all I got.
Very cool. All right. My endorsement actually is there's another podcast called Earbud Theater that is produced by a fellow I know called Casey Wolf. And they have a new episode, just came up last week, called Habitat, which is about, it's a fascinating story. It's like something straight out of Twilight Zone. It's not a podcast like ours where we do a panel show, but they're actually doing full-on dramas. And they only do a few episodes a year, but, they have full cast, they have sound effects. It's a drama in the style of, CBS Radio Mystery Theater. And they have a brand new episode called Habitat, written by Nicholas Thurkettle, and it's about this astronaut who she wakes up in a habitat that aliens have created for her after she's crash landed on another planet, and it's just a really fascinating story, and it reminded me of the best of the Twilight Zone episodes that went along that kind of concept, especially ones like The Lonely. And a few others where you had one person just in isolation. So I totally recommend Habitat, which is part of the Earbud Theater, and I'll put a link to it. And that's it for me this week. And in fact, next week the gang is going to be back, but we're going to be mixing up the cast a little bit because some of us are going to be traveling, and so we'll leave what we're coming back with as something of a surprise. But let me just say thank you for listening. Leave us comments on the Facebook page. Leave us reviews on iTunes. Tell your friends. Listen to us on Stitcher. Subscribe. Do whatever it is that you're going to do, but please keep coming back and telling us what you want to hear more of. We're very, very thankful to get all the comments.
I think everybody's going to think the upcoming episodes are groovy.
I think they will be groovy. I think they will, but I wish that I would be around for them. So, okay. Thank you very much. Oh, one more thing. As Darren in the chat room pointed out, 4th of July is happening, so one thing I definitely endorse is fireworks. So everybody go out and have some fun.
America.
Thanks, everybody. Have a fantastic, fantastic evening.
Awesome.
Night.
Bye.
Bye, you guys.
Night.